Hello and welcome back to another video. Today I may or may not will be taking a look at a slightly more unusual case. It might turn out to be a too expensive surprise or simply just good at the end of the day. We are talking of the FSP CMT520 Plus case. At the time of this video, the price should apparently be around the $115 mark, which, while not being super expensive, it's not necessarily cheap either. At a price of over $100, it sure needs to get more than just one thing right. But let me tell you right away, there are aspects where this case certainly does let me down. Other things, on the other hand, have been done pretty good. So at the end of the day, we have to evaluate the pros and cons here. I mean, absolutely perfect products are rare, no question. So what makes up a good rating is a good mix of pricing, features, and quality. Do we actually get such a mix here with this CMT520 Plus, or is it simply too flawed? Let's find out. Included is a so-called acrylic halo cover. This reflective, shiny, and certainly elegant cover to many can and should be used as a PSU shroud cover held in place by magnets. Unfortunately, we are talking of acrylic here, meaning it's not only quite sensitive when it comes to scratches, but also attracts lots of dust. Perhaps not necessarily the wisest choice by the manufacturer to put this thing inside a case. But other than that, aesthetically speaking, I personally like it. When it comes to the CMT520 Plus's overall look, definitely not bad at all. I do admit it's not really my taste, but that doesn't matter. Tastes differ, we all have different ones. So I'm fairly sure others will love the blended look of elegance and gaming, if you will. What immediately catches one's eye are the 4 pre-installed 120mm fans sporting RGB lighting, 3 in the front and 1 on the rear as usual. Unfortunately, there's no sign of any type of fan speed control. Out of the box, all 4 are already daisy-chained with their respective Molex connectors, therefore they operate at the full 12 volts. No 3 or 4-pin PWM connectors. Unfortunately, I also can't really state that these fans in that configuration are necessarily quiet. I mean, I wouldn't go out and call them loud, but they're definitely very audible. What bothers me personally is the slightly annoying quiet rattling noise coming from the fan bearings. That's hardly audible, but that's something I tend to pick up very quickly. What a bummer. To now move on a more positive note, surprising is the fact that there's an integrated RGB controller on board, and it happens to come with these standard connections, no nasty proprietary ones. The 4 fans are already hooked up to the controller out of the box, but we do get 4 additional headers should we need them. Furthermore, each and every fan allows us to daisy chain and pass on the signal to another RGB product. So at the end of the day, we have far more than just 4 extension options for lighting. Hats off for that. In the front, by pressing the button, colors and effects can be changed. However, you're not forced to just use the controller. If you hold down the LED button in the front for 3 seconds, our motherboard could take care of the RGB duty. Just use the correct cable for that configuration. Now, there's not only glass on the side, but in the front as well. The airflow, as always, isn't necessarily the best when it comes to such, let's call them, prettier designs, but to my surprise, the airflow doesn't even turn out to be too bad here. A good amount of fresh air actually manages to get into the case, not only through the usual vents, but the gap between the glass and plastic too. I find it very disappointing though that we don't get any dust filter in the front. It sure complements airflow, but yeah, at that price, a bit lackluster. At the top, for instance, there's a magnetic one, and on the bottom, a short removable one for the PSU. Now, when glancing over to the specs, we don't actually spot anything out of the ordinary really that could end up being a game changer. What's different though is that we don't get 7 but 8 expansion slots in total. Up to a 360mm radiator not only fits in the front but at the top as well. That certainly is pretty good, and the installation was hassle-free in my case with a 240mm radiator, no issues. Even long graphics cards don't end up causing any issues whatsoever, although I will have to let fans of vertical GPU mounting down. This is not an option here, probably due to airflow reasons, so it doesn't bother me at all. What does stand out anyway is that the CMT520 Plus does allow us to actually showcase our good power supply choice. There's a cutout for it, and since I had an FSP PSU lying around, I decided to install it into this FSP case, to match the brand. time for mass storage and SSDs. 3.5-inch drives, there can fit a total of 2. The installation is all toolless with these trays. 2.5-inch SSDs, as usual, can be mounted to the back of the motherboard tray. Albeit, FSP does allow us to showcase 2 more on the main side, so altogether we get 4 dedicated mounting points for 2.5-inch drives. At a price of over $100, I find it a bit of a shame that there are no rubber grommets included, especially since out of the box there's already quite the cable mess going on. I admit I haven't necessarily done a good job at cable management, something you might be used to see when I review cases. It always ends up being quite messy and chaotic, but well, other than that, the FSP CMT520 Plus does make a solid impression. Sure, it has quite a few shortcomings. To add all of those up, a missing dust filter in the front, no rubber grommets, something that ends up being very noticeable with this case, and last but not least, the fact that the fans need to be connected via Molex. You don't have any other choice in fact. Furthermore, the fans cannot be considered the quietest on the market, especially not when being forced to run them at 12 volts. However, there also are good things I can say about today's case. For instance, it's quite spacious, meaning we not only can fit a 360mm radiator in the front, but at the top as well. eATX motherboards as well as long GPUs also don't cause any clearance issues. On top of that, the integrated RGB controller, along with its great options for extension, is pretty impressive too, especially since it's all standard connectors for the lighting. So all in all, I wouldn't necessarily state the CMT520 Plus blows my mind. It does not. To be perfectly honest with you, all these flaws and the price of over $100 don't go well together. Certainly a bit disappointing to say the least. I believe a price tag of about $85 would make more sense here. Nevertheless, some things this case does pretty good even at that higher price tag. To me it seems this case more or less has been randomly generated in some way, some aspects ending up being too cheap, others too costly. A more proper balance of all these things certainly would have created a better product for the manufacturer as well as consumer in my opinion. But still, the FSP CMT520 Plus still is somewhat decent. But at the end of the day, it's you that has to make the final choice. With that being said, bye everyone. Thanks for watching and take care of yourselves.